We're behind the scenes at Sauber F1 team today, and we are going to give you a behind the scenes tour of just what the history of the team is all about. And the first thing I want to show you today is a VW Beetle. Seems a bit strange because we're at Sauber F1, but this car, obviously not this one, is incredibly important in the history of Sauber. This was one of the first cars that Peter Sauber owned. Back in 1967, he used to drive this to work. He then started tinkering with the VW. And by 1970, that was when he wanted to get into the sports car championship. And you can see all these cars here. They are the miniatures of all the cars that Peter Sauber created. Right up to here where we've got Mercedes engines coming in, and some of them, look at those, all facing each other, looking great. But then back down here, of course, F1 is what they do best. This was the first F1 car that Sauber created, the C12, back in 1993. But we haven't come all the way to Switzerland to see model cars. I'm going to show you the real deal. Let's go and find that first F1 car. We're going from tiny model cars to slightly bigger model cars. Cast your mind back to 1991. At this time, Mercedes wanted to get into F1 and they wanted to go in with Sauber. 1992, there's a problem. Mercedes decide they don't want to go into F1, but Peter Sauber decides to go it alone. They run tests all through 1992, and in 1993, Sauber make their debut into F1 with the C12. Now, if you thought that little car was good, come on over here, because we've got the real deal. Here it is. And the drivers back in the day were Carl Wendlinger and JJ Leto. Look at this car, unbelievable. I'm slightly concerned for the safety of the drivers at this point. There is nothing like the modern day F1 car to protect them. And because Mercedes weren't there, but they realised actually the team did pretty well. They scored 12 points and came 7th in the Constructors' Championship. They wanted some recognition, so they asked for this concept by Mercedes-Benz to be put on the side of the car. And that was Sauber's first year in F1. Let's go find the car from 1994. So, 1994, Sauber's second year in F1, and this is the C13. After all the little issues with Mercedes not coming on board in the first year, Peter Sauber managed to convince them to come back in. They'd had concept by Mercedes on the first car, but then they managed to get the engines inside as well, working alongside Ilmor still. The two drivers for the team, Heinz-Harald Frentzen and Carl Wendlinger. And they actually had a few issues that year. They had a few sponsorship issues, and Carl Wendlinger had a massive crash in Monaco. And at the end of the year, Sauber parted company with Mercedes. They went to McLaren, and that meant Sauber had to find a new engine partner. So in 1995, they found Ford. So Ford came on board as an engine partner, and that, believe it or not, was the year, 1995, that Red Bull came into F1. They came onto the car, you got lovely Red Bull branding all over it, and that was actually a 10-year deal they signed. In 1996, they didn't have such a good year. They had Johnny Herbert, the Sky pundit, driving for them. And in 1997, Ford finally parted company with Sauber. They were poached by Jackie Stewart, would you believe, who was setting up a new team. And it was in 1996, before Ford left, that Petronas came on board as a title sponsor for Sauber. 1998 saw them get their best result yet, finishing 6th in the Constructors' Championship. And then in 1999, it all got a little bit tricky with a not very successful 7-speed magnesium-cased semi-automatic gearbox. And in 2000, Mika Salo, so many names that you just don't expect cropping up at Sauber. And there are so many more that we're going to discover as we go through the factory looking at all their cars. And one of the biggest names was Kimi Raikkonen. Yes, he started his career right here in Sauber. And by the way, I'm sorry about the noise. This is the wind tunnel at Sauber, so bear with me on the noise. So Kimi Raikkonen was coming into Formula 1 in 2001, and there was some huge controversy. Red Bull even, the sponsors of Sauber, there you can see all that lovely branding, they didn't want Kimi Raikkonen as a driver. They thought he was too young, a lot of people in the paddock thought he was too young, and Red Bull actually wanted Enrique Bernoldi. But they didn't get their way. Kimi Raikkonen came on board, partnering Nick Heidfeld. And that year, there were some technical regulation changes. They wanted a stronger monocoque, they wanted side pods and the roll hoop much stronger. And check this out, this was the first year that they used pretty much all carbon fibre for the suspension. And of course, Kimi Raikkonen went on to prove everybody wrong. Not only was he successful in F1, he then went on to be successful in WRC, and of course he's now back again in F1. And another driver that's come through Sauber, Felipe Massa. Yep, you better believe it. He came in 2002 to partner Nick Heidfeld, and then, quite fittingly, they built the wind tunnel in 2003 and put it into practice in 2004, which brings us nicely on to 2005. The C24. Now, Peter Sauber was getting a little bit older in 2005 and he wanted to put Sauber into safe hands. And it just so happened that BMW were looking around and they wanted a works team. Sauber wanted an engine partner and a safe pair of hands. And so the two came together to create BMW Sauber. The same sponsors stuck around. We still had Petronas, they still had Credit Suisse. And at the time they had Jacques Villeneuve and Felipe Massa driving. The next year, in 2006, it was Jacques Villeneuve and Heidfeld and Kubica, Robert Kubica, yes, another F1 rally driver. He came in as the third driver. And then it's worth pointing out that in 2007, Kubica had a massive crash. And step in, Mr. Sebastian Vettel. He came in as a test and development driver for Sauber. Honestly, this place just has the biggest names ever if you look back into the history books. And of course, we then move in to 2008, the first win for Sauber. It was Kubica who took the win and Heidfeld got second place. They had a 1-2 on their first victory in Canada. And this is the car they won it in. Check it out. Look at the aerodynamics of this car. You just don't see anything like this on the grid at the moment. So they won in 2008. It was all going so well. And then suddenly in 2009, shock horror. Those safe hands that Peter Sauber had put Sauber into disappeared. BMW leaving F1. That led to a terrible chain of events. In 2010, Sauber didn't even nearly make it into F1. They were given a 14th entry, and that means basically if all the teams agree that they can enter, then they're allowed to race, or if another team drops out, then they take that place. And luckily, thank goodness, in the 11th hour, Toyota Racing dropped out, and it meant that Sauber could still take part in 2010 with the Ferrari engines. 2011, and we get all Mexican. It was Sergio Checo Perez's debut in F1 with Sauber. He came in to partner Kobayashi, and before you think I've got it wrong and this isn't the 2011 car, it is, trust me. It's the C30 from 2011, but it's got the 2012 livery on it. So don't worry, I've got it covered. Come over here. Back to the rear wing. Now, this was pretty infamous because in the very first race of 2011, Sauber were disqualified because the curve of the rear wing was out only by a matter of millimeters, but it all counts in F1, of course. This was also the car that Sergio Perez crashed in Monaco. He sat for ages as we watched to see if he was all right, and it was okay. He'd actually got just concussion, but this was the car that it all happened in. 2012, more success for Sergio Perez, not so much crashing, second, third. And then we move into 2013. This year, Nico Hülkenberg joins Sauber with Esteban Gutierrez. A bit more Mexican madness for Sauber. And check out the trophies behind me. What a huge cupboard full of trophies. Will they be adding to it anytime soon? I think they might. There's been some strong performances from both drivers this season already. So that is my whistle-stop tour of the Sauber F1 team's history. Keep an eye on pole position. We are going to have so much more from Switzerland and from Sauber coming up soon. Look at that, look at the detail, it's unbelievable. Now these cars go through massive testing at the beginning of the year. If they fail the crash testing, they can't actually compete in F1. So vital that this part is strong enough to protect the driver.